Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. Why aren't you afraid, human? His response stunned everyone. Captain Lyra Finn stood motionless before the observation window. Her four amber eyes narrowed to slits as she studied the creature on the other side of the reinforced glass. Her exoskeletal fingers tapped an impatient rhythm against her thigh. Click, click. A nervous habit she developed after too many cycles in deep space. Command. I don't understand it, she muttered, the gill-like respiratory flaps at her neck pulsing rapidly with confusion. On the vitals again, K. Science Officer Krenbeck's lore sighed dramatically, his massive shoulders hunching as he manipulated the console. Eighth time's the charm, I suppose, he said with a snort that sent his nasal tendrils fluttering, though I doubt the results will magically change in the last 3 minutes. The holographic display between them shimmered and recalibrated, bathing the dim control room in ghostly blue light that made Lyra's copper-toned skin look almost sickly. See? Exactly what I said before. Kren gestured with his upper arms while his lower set continued working the controls. Heightened heart rate, yes. Elevated cortisol, absolutely. But nowhere near the panic thresholds we'd expect in a captured specimen, especially not one so fragile-looking. On the other side of the glass, the human sat perfectly still on the examination table, male, according to their scans, approximately 35 local Earth years in age. They designated him Subject M7, but the crew had started calling him Stoneface behind Lyra's back. It's not the most creative nickname, but fitting for how unnervingly calm he appeared. It makes no logical sense, Lyra hissed, spinning away from the window with a graceful, almost predatory movement. We abducted it from its natural habitat. We're 10 light years from its home world. It's surrounded by aliens it's never encountered before. By all accounts, it should be utterly terrified. Kren barked out a laugh, his mandibles clicking with amusement. Maybe our translators are broken. Maybe it's screaming on frequencies we can't hear. Not funny, Kren, Lyra growled, though a hint of a smile tugged at her facial ridges. This is serious. How am I supposed to write a proper first-contact psychological profile when the subject refuses to display appropriate fear responses? The High Command will think I'm fabricating data. Medical technician Bjorn floated into the room then, her hover chair humming softly as she approached. Being from a low-gravity moon, she needed the chair for mobility on the ship, but her brain made up for any physical limitations. Or perhaps, she said in her melodic, whispery voice, our understanding of human psychology is fundamentally flawed. Lyra waved a dismissive hand. Impossible. We studied their entertainment broadcasts for decades. Their literature, their movies, their historical records. Fear is their primary motivator. Their entire civilization is built on avoiding things that frighten them. And yet, Gel gestured toward the window with a slender six-fingered hand. Through the glass, the human suddenly looked up, almost as if he could hear their conversation, and smiled directly at Lyra. Not a nervous smile, not a placating grimace meant to appease a predator. A genuine, confident smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Then, most disturbing of all, he waved at her, like they were old friends meeting across a crowded room. Holy nebulous, Kren whispered, did it just. Lyra felt a cold sensation wash through her circulatory system. Prep the interrogation chamber, she ordered, her voice dropping to a dangerous purr. I want to know exactly what's wrong with this human. The interrogation chamber aboard the research vessel Uncored Distant Curiosity was designed to induce maximum psychological discomfort in nearly every sentient air-breathing species cataloged in the Galactic database. The lighting pulsed at frequencies known to cause subtle disorientation. The temperature fluctuated unpredictably between too warm and too cold, and even the air contained trace amounts of stress-inducing pheromones that wouldn't register consciously but would work on a deeper, more primal level. None of it seemed to bother Subject M7 in the slightest. Recording initiated, announced the ship's AI in its flat, emotionless voice. First contact interrogation protocol, Subject M7, Cycle 34402016,807. Such measures. The Galactic Science Coalition had strict rules about ethical treatment of study subjects, even potentially dangerous ones. Do you understand me? She asked, carefully enunciating each word as the translation matrix processed her speech into what their research indicated was the human's primary language. The human, Marcus Reed, according to the identification they'd found on him, nodded casually. Perfectly. Your translator tech is impressive, way better than our prototype systems back home. Kren, who stood in the corner with a shock prod just in case, exchanged glances with Lyra. The human's ease with their technology was unexpected. You seem remarkably calm for someone in your position, Marcus Reed, Lyra said, intentionally using his name to establish psychological dominance. Why is that? The human shrugged, such a curiously expressive gesture for beings with such limited joint mobility. Should I be running around screaming or something? Would that make this easier for you? His mouth curved upward in that disturbing smile again. Lyra leaned forward, her claws extending slightly before she caught herself, and retracted them. Our research indicates humans experience extreme fear responses when faced with the unknown. You are currently in a completely alien environment, surrounded by beings not of your world. Your vital signs show awareness of danger, yet you display no outward fear. Explain. Marcus leaned back in his chair, somehow making the uncomfortable interrogation seat look like a casual lounge. Maybe your research needs updating. Or maybe, he winked, another strange human expression. I'm not your average human. Is that a threat? Kren growled from his position, the shock prod humming to life in his lower hands. Marcus laughed, the sound bouncing off the metal walls with unexpected warmth. No, just an observation. But I am curious. He leaned forward now, mimicking Lyra's posture with uncanny precision. Why are you so afraid of me? The atmosphere in the interrogation chamber shifted palpably. Lyra's exoskeletal plates bristled, a defensive reaction she couldn't fully suppress. How dare this primitive creature suggest she felt fear, she, a captain of the Galactic Science Coalition's elite research fleet. Your psychological manipulation attempts are noted but ineffective, she stated coldly, her voice dropping to the subsonic range that most prey species found deeply unsettling. We ask the questions, you provide answers. Marcus Reed's expression remained frustratingly neutral, save for a slight quirk of his eyebrow. Fair enough. But you can asking the wrong question from the start. Krent moved closer, his massive frame casting a shadow over the human. And what exactly is the right question, meatbag? Kren, Lyra snapped, her gill flaps fluttering with annoyance at his unprofessional conduct. Marcus didn't flinch at the insult or the intimidation attempt. Instead, he stretched his arms overhead with an audible popping sound from his joints that made both aliens wince involuntarily. The right question isn't why aren't you afraid, he said conversationally. It's what have you seen that makes this situation seem routine. Lyra felt a strange sensation at the base of her spine, the ancestral warning system her species had evolved millions of years ago, when they were still small scavengers hiding from larger predators in the caves of Noxia Prime. She ignored it. Elaborate, she commanded, activating the neural recorder implanted behind her secondary eyes. This was becoming interesting. Look, Marcus leaned forward, his hands clasped together on the table. I get it. You studied our entertainment broadcasts, right? All those alien abduction movies where humans panic and scream and generally act like idiots. Kren made a sound suspiciously like a suppressed laugh, earning him another glare from Lyra. Those are fictional narratives designed to elicit emotional responses from viewers, Marcus continued. They don't represent actual human psychology or behavior under stress. That would be like me assuming all of your species are violent conquerors based on, I don't know, your military recruitment ads. My assessment was based on multiple data sources. Lyra countered, though a seed of doubt had been planted, including historical records of first contact scenarios between human cultures. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Historical records from how long ago? 100 years? 200? We evolve quickly, culturally speaking. He has a point, came V's voice through the comm system. The medical technician was monitoring from the adjacent room, especially considering the accelerated development curve we've observed in their communications technology over the past solar cycles. Lyra shot an irritated glance at the observation window, though of course she couldn't see V through the one-way material. What I'm trying to tell you, Marcus said, his voice suddenly softer, more serious, is that we've been preparing for this moment for generations, some of us more directly than others. A heavy silence filled the room as the implications of his statement sank in. You, Lyra's voice faltered before she regained her composure. You've encountered alien species before. It wasn't a question. Marcus smiled again, but this time there was something different about it, something ancient and knowing that sent another primordial warning signal up Lyra's spine. Not officially, he said quietly, but let's just say this isn't my first rodeo. Navigator, replay the acquisition sequence, Captain Lyra ordered, pressing her palm to the neural interface panel. The interrogation needed a brief recess, if only to give her time to process the human's unsettling claim. A holographic display in the center of the room flickered to life, projecting a three-dimensional recreation of events from 12 Earth hours earlier. The uncored distant Curiosity had been orbiting the third planet of the Sol system, cloaked against detection by the primitive radar systems the humans still relied upon. Their mission: collect specimen samples from various regions to update the Galactic Coalition's outdated xenobiology database on emerging civilizations. Target acquired, came Tactical Officer Zebpak's recorded voice as the hologram showed the ship's sensors focusing on a remote cabin in what humans called Montana, a sparsely populated region and perfect for discrete specimen collection. Single life form detected, added Science Officer Kren. Minimal technology present. Extraction difficulty negligible. Present-day Kren shifted uncomfortably as the recording continued. In hindsight, they had been embarrassingly overconfident. The extraction beam engaged, a cone of shimmering blue light descending from the vessel to envelop the small wooden structure. Standard procedure called for immediate molecular stasis, a process that would freeze the subject in a state of suspended animation until safely aboard. Except it hadn't worked. Stasis field failure. Hologram, Kren shouted, his forearms moving frantically across control panels. Subject remains conscious. Impossible. Impossible, muttered present-day V, who had joined them to watch the replay. The field generates a neurological dampening effect that works on 99.8% of carbon-based life forms. The recording showed the cabin roof partially dissolving as the beam intensified. A figure, recognizable now as Marcus Reed, had emerged onto what appeared to be a wooden deck. Rather than displaying panic, he had looked directly up at the ship, visibility settings be damned, and waved. Then, most confounding of all, he had calmly walked into the center of the beam and placed his hands in his pockets, as if waiting for an elevator. He knew exactly what was happening, Lyra murmured, pausing the recording. Look at his posture. That's not confusion or fear. That's expectation. More than that. Vel pointed with a slender finger. Look at his left wrist. The image zoomed and enhanced. There, barely visible beneath the sleeve of his garment, was a small device. We assumed it was primitive timekeeping technology, Kren said defensively. Run a spectral analysis on that device, Lyra ordered. The hologram shifted colors as the computer complied, displaying a breakdown of materials and energy signatures. By the void, Vel whispered. That's quantum entanglement technology. Primitive, but there's no way humans should have that yet. He activated it right as our beam locked on, Kren realized, replaying the milliseconds before extraction. He sent a signal. The recording continued, showing Marcus being drawn upward into the ship, his expression never changing from one of calm determination. No struggle, no resistance. As if being abducted by aliens was simply an appointment he'd been keeping. To whom did he signal? Lyra asked, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ship's systems. And why was he waiting for us in the middle of nowhere? Present day, Marcus's words echoed in their minds. This isn't my first rodeo. Testing human limits. Resume standard testing protocols. Lyra commanded as they returned to the main laboratory. Her outer composure remained professional, but internally her mind raced with questions about their unusual specimen. Marcus Reed sat in the center of the circular testing chamber, surrounded by a series of projected environments designed to trigger fight or flight responses. The chamber could simulate everything from extreme weather conditions to predator encounters, all while monitoring the most minute physiological reaction. Beginning simulation sequence Alpha 9, announced Vel from her control station. Terrestrial predator scenario. The room around Marcus shimmered and transformed into a dense jungle environment, with the temperature and humidity adjusted accordingly, and the distinct growl of what humans called a tiger rumbled through hidden speakers. According to their research, this apex predator had been responsible for thousands of human deaths throughout their history. Marcus yawned. Increase threat level, Lyra ordered, her claws clicking against the observation glass. The simulation changed. Now multiple predators circled the human. The sounds intensified, the lighting dimmed to create a nighttime scenario where human visual acuity was known to decrease significantly. Marcus sat cross-legged on the floor and closed his eyes, his breathing pattern shifting into what their scanners identified as a meditation state. He's actually relaxing, Kren exclaimed, his mandibles clicking in disbelief. Switch to environmental fears. The scene shifted again. Now Marcus stood at the edge of a seemingly bottomless chasm, winds howling around him, the narrow ledge beneath his feet crumbling away. Height-based fears are nearly universal among terrestrial species, V noted. Their evolutionary history makes falling a deeply ingrained danger. Marcus walked to the edge, looked down into the abyss, and then sat down, dangling his legs over the precipice like a child at a swimming pool. This is unprecedented, V whispered, her 6 fingers dancing across the monitoring equipment. Either this specimen is psychologically abnormal for his species or our entire understanding of human fear responses is flawed, Lyra finished grimly. They progressed through scenario after scenario. Drowning simulation, fire, toxic environments, social rejection, even abstract fears based on human mythology, creatures they called demons and monsters, pieced together from their entertainment broadcasts. Nothing. Not even a spike in heart rate. Final protocol, Lyra said flatly. See no biological threat scenario. The room transformed into a perfect replica of the interrogation chamber, but this time projections of Lyra's species appeared. Larger, more aggressive versions with exaggerated predatory features. Their historical forms from millions of years ago, before civilization had tempered their evolution. The simulated aliens surrounded Marcus, hissing and clicking, their claws extended, venom dripping from specialized glands that modern members of Lyra's species no longer possessed. For the first time, Marcus reacted. He stood up straight, his posture shifting subtly, not into a fear response, but into a fighting stance. Interesting, he said, addressing the real aliens behind the observation glass rather than the simulations. You've done your homework on our fears, but you've missed something fundamental about humans. And what might that be? Lyra asked through the communication system. Marcus moved with sudden, surprising speed, ducking under the claws of one simulated alien and driving his fist into what would be a vulnerable point on a real specimen. The simulation flickered. It wasn't programmed for such specific combat interactions. Our fears don't paralyze us, Marcus said, breathing steadily despite his sudden movement. They prepare us. Every predator you've shown me, we've hunted them to near extinction. Every environmental threat, we've engineered solutions. Every social fear, we form stronger bonds because of them. He turned to face the observation window directly, somehow knowing exactly where they watched from, despite the one-way material. You keep asking why I'm not afraid, Marcus said quietly. Maybe you should be asking what humans do when they're afraid. Captain Lyra made a decision. Protocol dictated maintaining separation between research subject and senior officers. But nothing about this human followed expected parameters. She entered the testing chamber herself, flanked by Kren, and with Vel monitoring remotely. You claim humans use fear differently, she said, approaching Marcus with measured steps. Explain. The simulation had been cleared, returning the room to its sterile, white-walled default state. Marcus sat comfortably in the center, watching Lyra with those unsettlingly perceptive eyes. Fear kept us alive for thousands of years, he began, his voice resonating with unexpected authority. But somewhere along our evolutionary path, something changed. We didn't just fear the darkness, we mastered fire to push it back. We didn't just fear predators, we crafted weapons to defeat them. We didn't just fear the unknown, we built ships and wagons, and eventually rockets to go discover it. Kren snorted. Many species develop technology to overcome environmental challenges. True, Marcus nodded, but how many develop technology specifically to face what frightens them most? Sentient life avoids danger. Humans, we run toward it. A haunting silence filled the chamber as Lyra considered his words. That still doesn't explain your personal lack of fear response, she pointed out. Even among thrill-seeking species, abduction by unknown aliens should register as a threat. Marcus smiled that infuriating smile again. Captain, do you know what I did before you picked me up from that cabin? Our records indicate you were a researcher of some kind. Vel's voice came through the comm system, specializing in astrobiology and synolinguistics. That's my cover job, yes, Marcus replied, surprising them again. My real position is First Contact Specialist for the Terran Defensive Initiative. I'd spent 15 years preparing for this exact scenario. Lyra's exoskeletal plates flattened against her body, a sign of extreme alertness in her species. Impossible. Earth has no official knowledge of extraterrestrial civilization. Your technology is centuries away from meaningful space travel. Officially, yes, Marcus agreed. Unofficially, we've known about the Galactic Coalition for decades. We've recovered crashed scout ships, captured surveillance drones, intercepted communications. We've been preparing while pretending to be oblivious. Preposterous, Kren growled. Your species can barely reach your own moon. That's by design, Marcus said calmly. We determined long ago that appearing non-threatening was our best defense, while broadcasting our entertainment and wars and messiest aspects into space for all to see. A coldness settled in Lyra's core. You've been projecting an image of emotional, irrational, fear-driven primitives, deliberately. The perfect camouflage, Marcus confirmed. Species that think you're primitive rarely see you as a threat. They become careless, complacent, like abducting a lone human from a remote cabin without checking for quantum entanglement devices. That signal you sent, Gull whispered through the comm. It was received. Marcus nodded. My team knows exactly where I am. You claim humans embrace fear, Lyra said, struggling to maintain her composure. What do you personally fear, Marcus Reed? His expression shifted then, showing the first genuine emotion they'd seen, a profound sadness that seemed to age his features.